I'm here today to do my informative speech on the president of basketball operations. I have my visual aid ready and Andrew here to watch. Now to start, why this topic, you might think? Well, the reason I chose this topic is because I love to play basketball and I also want to do business as my major. And so one of the best jobs I could have would be to be the president of basketball operations for an NBA team, such as Doc Rivers, who also was a coach as well. And I would also love to coach basketball. Doc Rivers has a phenomenal resume. He's won with a bunch of teams that honestly didn't belong to be where they were today. And so my favorite memory would be when he took the Orlando Magic to the playoffs one year, and they fell one game short of actually making the playoffs. But it was a fun team to watch, and they didn't have any superstars on that team or anything like that, so they really had no business being in the playoffs. The main job of the president of basketball operations is acquiring players. There are three different ways to acquire players: trades, free agency, and the NBA draft. Obviously, the best player in the league, LeBron James, would be the guy that you'd want to choose as a player to sign on your team. But there are also other good players, and you can beat one good player if you get a team ready, full of good players and guys that are willing to work hard for your cause. The first part, trading. Trading is a good way to get players, although there is one catch to trading. The thing is, when you trade, typically if you go to another team, you're going to have to overpay for a player. So a big trade that happened was a Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul trade. Chris Paul's on the screen there. Chris Paul went to the Oklahoma City Thunder. He's on that picture. And Russell Westbrook went to the Houston Rockets. Russell Westbrook and the Rockets wanted to build a team that could win a championship this year, and so the Rockets went all in, and so they traded a few picks and Chris Paul for Russell Westbrook. And Russell Westbrook is on the decline of his career. He is a very good player, and he did win a couple MVPs in his career. So it was a good trade for the Rockets, although they did have to give up Chris Paul and a few picks that they really wanted to keep. But if a team comes to you with a trade, then you have the opportunity to make the other team overpay for a player. And the Oklahoma City Thunder, when they traded for Chris Paul originally, had no point in keeping him, considering they wanted to restart their entire team. And Chris Paul is 36 in the decline of his career. So they were going to trade Chris Paul after they got him, although no teams wanted Chris Paul. And so really, the Thunder got a pretty bad trade out of the end, although Chris Paul really helped their young core develop this year, so it worked out for them at the end. And the Rockets got beat by the Lakers again, so it didn't really work out for them. The next thing is free agency. A big upcoming free agent, and next year it's going to be Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's a phenomenal forward for the Milwaukee Bucks, reigning MVP, back-to-back MVP, and he's looking for a championship team so he can go and compete. Now the thing with free agency, the player you're going to get, you already have a scouting report on him, other teams already told you about this guy, so it's a pretty safe way to get a player, although free agency is typically going to be long-term deals with the guy, and you're going to have to pay a lot of money for them. Although typically you get both ends of the party, the player and the team are typically going to find a good middle ground to where they can, make a good deal. So you're not overpaying for the player, but you can't really get a good deal in a free agency opportunity. Now, the next way to get a player is by drafting them. The NBA draft works a little bit different. So if you have the worst record, that doesn't guarantee you the first pick. If you have the worst record, you have a chance of getting the first pick. You have the best chance to get the first pick, although you don't necessarily get the first pick. So if you have the worst record, you can get picks anywhere from 1 to 6. You have a 25% chance, which is the most you can get, to get the number 1 pick. And then you have a 17.4% chance to get the 6th pick, which these aren't very bad opportunities, although obviously the first pick is the best pick, so you can pick whoever you want. And then also drafting a player, you're going to get them for cheap if you need them on a rookie contract. And so it's a great way to get a phenomenal player to put on your team, and you don't have to really worry about it. So the top 14 picks are the teams that didn't make the playoffs, and those are considered lottery picks. And when you get a lottery pick, that's one of the best picks you can get in the NBA, obviously, besides like top 10, top 5, and the number 1 pick. And when a lottery pick, you can get a really good player out of that, and you can get them for really cheap. And then the picks after that, like the late first round picks, those picks aren't really valued as much, as there's typically around 15 guys each draft that can really change a team that year, like immediately. And this brings me to my next topic. Why would you pick these players? Well, there's a few different reasons you could pick these players. Position, their play style, and their behavior. Now, this is Greg Popovich. He runs a really nice system with the Spurs. He also happens to be a president of basketball operations, along with a coach, and he's one of the best coaches to ever play the game of basketball. Now, the first thing is position. This is DeAndre Jordan. He's a center, and he cannot play any other position. Pure center, cannot shoot the ball, cannot move anywhere besides center. He doesn't have the play style to play anywhere besides center. The position you need on the team is heavily dependent on how the team likes to play. And so if you want a few guys that go out there and they play really good defense, DeAndre Jordan would be a good guy to have. He's a really good defensive anchor, and he'll play inside for you really well. And a great rebounder, a very fundamental center. And then another thing is their play style. This is another center in the league, PJ Tucker. This guy is a little bit shorter, very much shorter than DeAndre Jordan. DeAndre Jordan is 7'2", PJ Tucker 6'7". Now, you're wondering, is it even fair to have a 6'7" guy on a 7'2" guy, right? Well, when this 6'7" guy can hit threes like PJ Tucker, it'll change the game, because that 7'2" guy, he can't get out to the 3-point line, but this 6'7" guy, very mobile, and then can also guard a bunch of different positions on the court. So it depends on the play style and the position they play as well. And the third thing, their behavior. Lou Williams recently got carded for going to a nightclub during the COVID break, and so he had to sit out for a quarantine period because he went to a nightclub during a COVID break. And so your behavior is a very key part in whether or not a team wants to pick you up. So if you act poorly off the court, a team might not want to pick you up. And then on the court, if you're also someone like Kyrie Irving on the court, a lot of people don't like to play with him because Kyrie Irving wants to be a leader, and not a lot of players like his leadership style. So, it depends on your behavior on and off the court of whether or not a team would want to pick you up. Now, the next thing is there's obstacles you might face as a president of basketball operations, depending on where you are and how your team is. So certain obstacles are, you could be a small market team, your organization could want a specific thing, or even your team chemistry. The Los Angeles Clippers have faced an obstacle. They could never make it to the conference finals in the playoffs, and they were hoping to have the first time of making the conference finals this year. although they ended up losing and blowing a 3-1 lead to the Nuggets this year. Next thing, a small market team. A small market team such as the New Orleans Pelicans, they don't have as much cap space as the larger market teams, right? So a team such as the Lakers, they have as much cap space as the NBA will give them. And so they can go off and they can sign a bunch of free agents and not really have to worry too much about the cap space. But a team like the Pelicans, they only have a limited amount of cap space, so they can only sign maybe one max deal and then some good players around that one max deal. These teams tend to do a lot more trades and a lot more picks because when you're a smaller market team, it's hard to build a team by people that you want to sign. So this team will probably draft a really good player. The New Orleans Pelicans drafted Anthony Davis, and then they'll try to build a team around the player that they drafted and see if they can win a championship with that player in a certain amount of time. And then once that player gets to the point to where that player needs a max deal, then they're probably going to trade that player. The next thing is the organization goals. Most organizations have the same goal, to win the Larry O'Brien Trophy. But certain organizations like to do it in specific ways, such as an organization like the Houston Rockets. They want to win the trophy. They want to use a small ball lineup. They want to shoot a lot of threes and try to win the game by hitting threes. And then other teams, such as the Los Angeles Lakers, who won the trophy this year, they play inside basketball. They try to have good off-ball movement and pass the ball around and see if they can win. So depending on what your organization wants to do, and sometimes your organization doesn't want a certain player representing them. So if a player were to do something off the court, an organization like the Denver Nuggets, who are very big on gay pride, so if a player were to tweet something against gay pride or something like that, the Denver Nuggets would be very strong against not getting that player. The next thing is team chemistry. You got to make sure the players and the coaches can all work together, because if they can't, you could have a situation like this to where the Warriors beat you in the finals and the one game you had a chance of winning is because someone ended up getting a costly turnover at the end of the game. The role of the president of basketball operations in the NBA is a very important role and has a lot of big opportunities that it has to do. Acquiring players is a very difficult process, and making sure you know what players to acquire and how to fit that into your scheme and your salary cap is a very difficult job. And I think if people understood more about this job, they would know more about the NBA and maybe enjoy the league more and enjoy to watch games more. And that is the end of my speech. Thank you guys for coming. Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah, that was. What sport was this again?